Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's been a year since I last saw you, so we have a lot to talk about. And I feel very honored to have been asked back to kind of talk about this topic with you again. Again, my name is Catherine Lyle. I'm the head of Cyber Incident Response and Claims at Tokyo Marine HCC for CPLG. And today we're going to be talking about claims, mostly what we are seeing in the market. We're going to kind of do a little bit of a backwards view and then move forward, and then also give you some predictions at the end of this. So I would be remiss, though, especially after following Bridget, if I didn't talk a little bit about the market, because it's very important that we talk about this so that you can understand also what's happening with claims. So in the market, what we're seeing is, unfortunately, a bit on the policy side. Now, I am not an underwriter. I couldn't stomach it. I can't, as I always say, I can't play Vegas. But this is what's happening overall in the market. So when we launch into this topic, it's important to know it because it impacts claims, right? On the insurance side, right, it impacts these claims. So standalone policies being purchased, we saw a decrease in 2023. Premium was the reason that we did see some growth. Now, without buyers coming into the market, growth is going to kind of continue, largely depend on this price change. So it's important to know this because what it's saying is that the number of new buyers that are coming in, right, is stagnating, which is so important, especially after you see what I'm going to talk about with you today, and after what Bridget just spoke about, because of the importance and the partnership with insurance, but also how we do cover these types of claims. During today's talk, we're going to always start very broad, and we're going to then drill down and go narrow. Then we're going to go very broad again, drill down narrow. So let's start very broad. But to do it also, I want to talk to you about where this data set is coming from. It is not just coming from Tokyo Marine. That would be far too limited. It would be far too limited to give you one insurer. Instead, what we've done is we've looked at the government. So we're looking at the FBI. We're looking at statistics from national insurance. We're looking at ours. We're looking at forensic providers who deal with insured and uninsured entities. So first, looking at this, let's look at what the FBI has provided with us. This is called IC3. I hope none of you have to file this report. When you file an IC3, you are voluntarily giving information to the FBI that says that a crime has been committed against you or your company. What's interesting about this, though, that you need to look at is it's both individuals and corporations. So it's a very, as I said, very broad, very wide. Also interesting here is phishing is the #1 crime. We can debate this. I'm not sure it's a crime as much as it is the attack vector, but the FBI hasn't been asking me on how to label these, but let's just go with it being a crime. It's an attack vector. So phishing, spoofing, #1. Within there, extortion, also known as ransomware. And then 2, 3 down, BEC, the business email compromise. Okay, so that is what the FBI is seeing on a national level. Then we can also look at what states are mostly involved. California, Texas, Florida. We know what they have in common. Size, right? So you have more citizens, you have more corporations, you have more harm. You also have more older individuals. So just kind of gives us a broader look at this. Now we can drill in a little bit. And as I said, we're going to be looking at data that's coming from a bunch of different places. This one is coming from a lot of forensic providers, insured and uninsured entities. So let's revisit 2023. So now we're going a little bit deeper, right? FBI was broad, a little bit deeper. This starts to tell a story, right? We're starting to see that there was a change between 2023 and 2024. But let's first look at 2023. As you recall, I'm sure you all remember my discussion last year, right? You've taken notes. Good. So from 2023, we had phishing email as the #1 attack vector. Why? Because it's easy, right? There's 100,000 hackers next door that'll be like, yeah, because I can spam everybody, send out hundreds of thousands of emails from somebody else's servers, and then just wait for someone to click. Then when someone clicks, now you're my target of choice because you clicked, okay? That's why phishing is done. It's easy. You don't have to be at a desk, and it's not super hard to do. I know how to do it. Indication it's not very hard to do. And it's so many at one time. Number 2 on the list for attack vectors in 2023 was RDP. Now this is RDP that is not hidden, right? So the hacker's driving down the internet, right? And it's like, oh, boom, RDP, boom, RDP, boom, RDP. Already these hackers are seeing it, so they know, hey, wait a minute, that's an easy way for me to get in. So I'm going to start phishing around this corporation to try to get in. Now, it's a smaller number of people that have access to it, right? But it is the keys to the kingdom. And if it's not hidden or have MFA, right, this is a target of choice then. And then number 3 in 2023 was VPN without MFA. Let's talk about that and the reason why. Here, you have a larger group that uses the VPN, the entire company. So you have 250 individuals at your company, 1,000 people. That's a lot more to phish. But also, let's talk about the number of vulnerabilities that VPNs have had, right? 2023, vulnerability after vulnerability after vulnerability. And we know statistically that 22 minutes after a vulnerability in a patch, it's in use. That vulnerability is in use. So if you can show me someone on any of your teams that can patch, receive the patch notice and patch within 22 minutes, well done. But that's not what's happening in the corporate world. So that's the look of what 2023 was. Now moving forward to 2024, phishing is still there because it's easy, right? Everyone's falling for it. Super hard to train for. And our good friend AI, although if you receive an email from me, it's most likely from ChatGPT. ChatGPT is also helping all of these threat actors to write a better phish. Now, what has changed, though, is that VPN without MFA has moved to the number 2 position. And that's because it's a larger landscape, easier to do it. Again, all of those vulnerabilities, and it's the keys to the kingdom. So what's happening, though, is that these corporations that are not using MFA are sending all their employees on the highway of the internet without a seatbelt. So here's MFA. This is the discussion. This is your seatbelt. This is your fire alarm. This is the thing that's supposed to protect you, save you, and help you. Now, this is a good story to tell until you start looking at the stagnation. 2021, 70% of the corporations weren't using MFA, right? And there's a difference. We can go, anybody who's out there that's really quick on MFA, I know you're going to come up and you're going to debate me and say, you know, they can always get around MFA. They absolutely can. And if you're a target of choice, sorry. However, if it's because of a phish, and if it's because you gave their password, and then all of a sudden they're like, boom, they hit MFA, they're like, well, I'll just move on to the next one who doesn't have it. They don't need to work super hard. Why work hard? Work smarter. So that's the issue with MFA. And so I'm just talking about simple MFA. You get a code, you're like, yep, that's me, right? Or you enter in a number. It just is a way of delaying. The seatbelt isn't there to prevent the accident. It's to prevent the further harm. The alarm, the same type of thing. Think of it in that way. But then what you see, though, is in 2023, we've moved to an impressive 44% that are still not implementing. And then we can get into the whole issue of implementing and enforcing, right? That's the next step that we have to talk about. But then we've stagnated, and if not gotten worse, in 2024, where now we have 45% that are not implementing MFA. I mean, I would have thought by now corporations would realize that that's the way to protect their employees. So now we've gone wide, and we've gone drilled down as to root cause, event types, right? Now let's drill into each one of these event types. There's going to be 4 that we're going to talk about that are problematic and things that have happened. So because of these event types, and the attack vector, right? Because of RDP, because of phishing, because of VPN, we have ransomware returning to the new normal. That's not good, right? This isn't great, guys. This is a situation where ransomware has come back aggressively. Let's talk about why. VPNs, RDPs, and phishing. But also in 2022, what we saw were that because of war-torn countries, people were fleeing countries and everything. And so these cyber corporations broke up, right? These big threat actor groups broke up. They all dispersed, went to other countries where they sought refuge, and then they reached out and found each other, and now they've created new groups. So now ransomware is back in, and we're seeing this. And we're seeing it with big ransoms. MGM, Caesars, and then Change Healthcare, which we'll talk about, right? We just saw it with CDK. I mean, I could keep going on and on. So we're seeing these big changes. A few positives, though. With the change of the variant types and smaller groups, and we'll come back to this issue of the smaller variants, we have seen also the percent of entities that are paying ransom go down. Could in part be because there's been a lot of communication about ransom, of hey, don't pay. But really, it's backups, so there's better education out there. 2, some are saying, hey, you know what, I'm not going to pay. They can keep my data. We'll survive. We're fine. So it's non-critical data. But the third reason is on a double exfiltration, which we're going to talk about, a double extortion, which is exfiltration and ransom, companies are realizing, hey, wait a minute, even though they're going to name and shame me, I'm not going to pay because I'm still going to have to notify. And the federal government has shown us with the Hive takedown that as much as they say, and they say to you, please trust us, even though we've already stolen your data and we're trying to ransomware, we're good criminals, we're honest, we're going to delete your data. Well, as we've taken down these other threat actors, we found that the data isn't deleted, and in fact, it's on multiple servers. So companies are realizing that what they say about deleting data isn't happening, and they still have to notify. What we are seeing, though, remember I talked about how variants have become smaller groups because of the war, they went elsewhere. So this is what's happening. It used to be, right, in 2023, you used to have 50% with a certain variant, 30% with a certain variant, Hello Kitty, Black Cat, all of these kind of things, these bigger variants. Well, the war ripped them apart, and now they're smaller threat actor groups. It's almost like they're personally owned, right? So they're corporations, but they're small. So this has allowed them to have these small cuts, but there's lots of people participating. But for instance, in July, right, just last month, 17% went to FOG, brand new variants. So we're having a lot of new variants and very small. But this is what it's giving to us. These are the trends now. So what we're seeing is, with that, these small variants, we're seeing a change in the way they ransom, which we'll talk about in just a second. So the way they ransom and the way they negotiate has changed. But we've also seen a change in the supply chain ransom, meaning that we are getting specialization from these threat actors, but they're not carrying it from cradle to grave. So they're not targeting a company for ransom and saying, we are going to figure out how to get in. We're going to figure out who to attack. We're then going to drop the packets and then ransom and do all of the negotiations. They're not doing cradle to grave anymore. Instead, we're seeing initial access brokers, and those initial access brokers are selling access. So they're sitting there and they're like, hey, look, I've got a whole board here of companies to which I have access to. Which one would you like? Do you want us to pay $10,000 for access to this company? $12,000 for access to this company, and that's what they're doing, they're selling it. And then the next group comes in. So say I'm like, I want to get in the game. I'm like, okay, I'll spend $20,000 to get access. Now I'm going to spend $50,000 for ransomware as a service. Then I'm going to launch it, get the negotiations going, right? And then make all my money. So that's how it's being split up. And the perfect place we saw this was in Change Healthcare. So in Change Healthcare, they paid $22 million for ransom. 4 terabytes of data were taken, but then they got re-ransomed because somebody in that chain, in that supply chain said, Alpha V didn't pay us. And so therefore, we've got 4 terabytes, and so we're going to hold it to you. So this is what's happening, and this is what's changed. Another thing, though, that's changed for the better is that with these smaller variants, they have more control. The threat actor has more control of what they're doing. They've had smaller ransom demands because they're taking in the money and they don't have a corporation or a manager to say, no, 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 it has to be always $2 million. We're Hello Kitty and we always demand $2 million and we don't move from that amount, right? Instead, they're doing smaller amounts and they're negotiating more. So with the good negotiators, you're able to get more back and save more when you have to. This isn't for just the hush money for the other things, but this is when you have to pay, right? So we're seeing these payments happening, smaller demands, smaller ultimate payments. So now we've just gone from wide on ransomware, narrowed down. Let's go wide on the next biggest event type, which is the BEC, the business email compromise. So this is the evil stepchild now to ransomware. It used to be, back in 2022, it was the #1 event type. But that's because you didn't have to sit at your desk to do it. Ransomware, you have to sit at their desk. After you launch, you have to communicate, you have to do these things. A BEC, you don't. You can be in their system and sit quietly and no one notices you're there. But BECs have gone year over year, increased. Now the frequency has gone a bit stagnant, but the severity has gone up. So that in 2023, it's cost about $2.9 billion. Digging into BEC, again, it had that consistent year over year, right? The year over year increase, but it is stabilized in terms of frequency, but it is just as costly as ransomware. So this is something you should think about as death by 1,000 cuts, because BEC is really leading to another crime, right? They're in the door, and yeah, they'll steal your data. Yeah, they'll do some of these other things, but they're probably trying to either then phish someone else to get other passwords, or because of password hygiene, use your password to get into something else. But they're probably looking for a way to monetize the crime, which is to make it a financial crime. So this is where they stay in the system, and by death by 1,000 cuts, we'll say on month 1, they insert themselves into a transaction and say, we know you pay this bill of $200,000 every month. Hey, by the way, we've moved banks. Send it over to GreenSpot. And you're like, oh, okay, $200,000 out. But then they stay in the system longer. And then when someone says, hey, you didn't pay the bill, the threat actor writes back, oh, that's because Susie was on vacation. She'll get to it. My apologies. She's probably digging out. Next month comes another 200,000. Next month comes another 200,000. 600 million. I've seen $6 million go out the door. It's a lot of money. So let's talk about the cause of BEC, right? Adoption of AI. We talked about that already. Really great at writing a really great phish. And failure to have MFA, right? Just remember MFA all day. Traditional phishing is fantastic. It's so great, and it works really well, and you can put it out to everybody. They're staying in the system longer, which is what we talked about, which increases the severity. And the other thing that is the cause for the increase of severity is that they're reaching for larger funds. It used to be back in the day, it was a cute $5,000, right? It's now hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. So what's the cure? MFA all day. Acting fast, right? Reaching out to law enforcement, reaching out to your carrier so we can use banking relationships, law enforcement. We recovered $9 million for our insureds Q1. This is something that we can work with, but law enforcement does as well. Also, train your employees. When there's a new or a change in a bill, that's when you pick up the phone and you say, hey, did you mean to send this to me? Did you mean to tell me that you had a new bank? And then when they say no, you've stopped it. So knowing that's accepted, it doesn't have to be every bill. The ones that are always paid the same, leave those alone. But if someone reaches out and says, hey, by the way, I need to change this, that should raise a red flag. Okay, we've gone ransomware down, BEC drilled in. Third, we're going to call the data breach. Now, I know somebody out there is going to be like, wait a minute, that's not really the only event type because that comes from ransomware and that comes from a BEC. But yes, we also do have just plain old data breaches where other governments are looking for data, right? We had some of the largest ones, which was MoveIt, the MoveIt vulnerability, and it caused a cascade of the largest data breach, but then Change Healthcare came along, knocked that right out in 2024. So these are the things that we're seeing, and this is all due to exfiltration of data, so record high, but it's also due to the changing of laws. These laws are requiring and changing what PII is, so that we're having to respond, and suddenly something that wasn't private information before suddenly is, which makes it a data breach. That very factor that I just talked about, is also causing the cost of a data breach to go up, right? The total cost is going up. Regulations have changed, but then also third-party actions. The plaintiff's bar is on this. The moment that a data breach is found out about, you don't even wait for the notifications to go out anymore. Within 2, 6, 12 days, class action suits are going out because the first one to court gets to win the class. And so what they get to win is the millions of dollars in the settlement. That's what's driving that. I am going to hold out, and I know a plaintiff's attorney somewhere in here is going to be like, Catherine, you were wrong. We do it for the right reasons. We're doing it solely because these people had their individual information stolen. And I'm going to say, bullshit. You're doing it so you can put money in your pocket. I don't care what you say. Because otherwise, you wouldn't take the money. Okay, as I promised, Change Healthcare. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. This is now the fourth, I'm going to call it the fourth event type. Bear with me. I know it is really a ransom event, but it's a supply chain hack. So the fourth event type that I'm going to hold out to you, and it's going to be a problem in 2024 and 2025, is the supply chain hack. So for those of you that don't know about Change Healthcare, I like to talk about Change Healthcare as it's an extension cord, okay? It's the very thing that connects the physician to the insurance carrier and gets the insurance carrier to pay them back, right? It'd be like services rendered, and the extension cord then goes back and here's your money. It's also the extension cord between the individual and the insurer to get their surgery. Hey, am I approved? Yes, you are. That's the extension cord. It's also the extension cord for prescriptions. Hey, I need this prescription. Okay, we're only going to give you $2, but it's $700. We're only giving you $2, right? That's the extension cord. So Change Healthcare had the unfortunate experience of being hacked, and I believe it was February 21. Actually, it was February 12th. They went in, dropped the packets, right? Then on the 21st, they launched it. So they were in there for quite a while, okay? So arguably, you wonder what happened here. And how did they get in? What didn't they have on that server? MFA. They didn't have MFA. Had they had MFA, this probably wouldn't have happened. So they transverse the system. Now Change Healthcare pays $22 million. And now it is the largest data breach that we've had out there. I literally received my letter yesterday. If anyone else has received their letter, welcome to the club. But this is the problem here, is it wasn't that it just impacted Change Healthcare. It impacted the physicians, it impacted the hospitals, it impacted the pharmacies. They weren't able to do business. It was a delay, but as you can see, what this supply chain is showing you, and that what all of these cases are showing you, is that dependent system failure is going to be a big thing in 24 and 25. Because all of these events, now I know CrowdStrike was not a ransom event, it was not extortion, it wasn't a data breach, it was fat thumbs. But the fact is it had the same cascading impact of system failure to the entities to which rely upon it and not able to do business. So this is what I think is going to be coming forward in 24 and 25 and is so important to keep an eye on. Let's move and look to see beyond, right? So I've just given you a little glimpse, a little taste, an amuse-bouche, shall we call it, of this outlook of what's coming up. Let's continue on and dive into that. My love for the plaintiff's bar, if it hasn't been transparent enough to you, this is going to be something else that they are doing. What they're doing is for website tracking litigation. It's going to continue in 24. It's going to continue in 25. They will find something else. What they're doing is they're taking old laws, right? So I used to be a prosecutor, and we had something in Massachusetts called the blood warrant. It's something that you had to get in order to wiretap. They have found these wiretap laws, and they're using them and saying, hey, wait a minute, because you did this, you tracked it, you're not supposed to do those things. They're using all of these antiquated laws to apply to a modern society. And they're going to continue to find more. But website tracking and litigation is here to stay. It's lucrative. And the thing is that these things are getting resolved now. So we're seeing settlements that are coming out, and we're seeing these elements. But these are just a taste of the laws that are being used right now to propagate this website tracking. Another thing for 24-25, VPN is the new RDP. There's no question about it. If you walk away with nothing else, VPN is the new RDP. VPN without MFA. Unprotected VPNs, it's the new attack vector. And this is because, again, we talked about the number of vulnerabilities, the landscape and the size, the ease, because once you're in, you've got the keys to the kingdom. All of these different vulnerabilities are causing great harm to corporations. But if they had MFA in place, it would stop it in its tracks. The last bit here is the outlook. So cyber extortion is going to continue. It's going to continue in the manner that we have seen. So we'll have more of this ransomware, but it's going to get worse in terms of aggressive nature. I have seen cases where the insured has reached out, and I've heard about it in speaking with forensic firms. They've received phone calls where the insured says, we have to pay because they're threatening to kill me. This is not my insured. I know there's another where there was a forensic firm that told me that they were threatened by cutting off their digits. They had photos of the individual. They said that I went on the dark web and I have a hit on you. They do their research. You have 3 children. You live in London. These are the things I know about you. I will find you. I will kill you, but I'm not going to kill you quickly. I'm going to kill you one by finger at a time until you pay me. So the cute days when Hello Kitty used to call the clients and say, hey, by the way, you want to tell your partner there to pay the ransom, that would be great, and they thought that was bad, imagine how much worse it is, how nerve-wracking, how horrible it is to now be threatened with your fingers. So that kind of aggression is happening, and it's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. Every single ransom is now going to be a double extortion. 2022, 2021, they used to only ransom and drop the packets and encrypt. Every time. It is so rare now, so rare, and it means that probably the EDR caught them in there, or somebody was catching on to them being present, that they don't exfiltrate data. So a double extortion is exfiltration of data and encryption. That's happening on every ransomware matter, and that will happen from here on out. Loss enforcement is getting more involved, and they're getting better now finally at working together. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that you're going to see FBI and Homeland Security working together. I mean globally. There are now projects around the globe to take down these threat actors. There's some debate to it of, hey, when you take them down, they just pop up and spin up and do something else. But we get a lot of information about what they're doing, and a lot of the information I've shared with you today comes from the things that we learn through those events, right? And sometimes just taking them down and slowing them down is good, but they're all working together, and you've seen it. How many of you saw the photos from Lockbit? I mean, that was, I think it should just be posted everywhere, because that photo itself, it should be, talk about a wall of shame. It's a brilliant photo. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. We talked about them being increasingly aggressive. And then finally, AI is going to continue to help this process. They're going to be able to write better, better scripts, do better reconnaissance, right? Hey, ChatGPT, tell me about XYZ Corporation. Who's the head? Where do they live? And what is their, their net worth, right? So they don't have to do as much research anymore because I've got AI doing it for me. So I don't want to leave you in a place of, I want to say thank you to these entities and everything, and that tells you where we got the data. But I also don't want to leave you in a place where you're like, well, this was a whole lot of doom and gloom, Catherine. Just remember MFA all day, right? Let's keep with that. But also with VPN being the new RDP, put MFA on it, because it really, any company that's not doing it, I can't say enough, is sending every single employee in their company down the internet highway just without a seatbelt. And that security is really needed. So I'm going to leave some time here for any questions. If anybody has questions, please ask them. If I don't know the answer, I am fully candid, and I'll let you know, because there's some realms of these areas I'm specialized in claims. But thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to get to talk to you all. Yeah.
So with the fracturing of the threat actor groups, is the Treasury Department keeping up with that as far as sanctions against those groups preventing entities from paying out?
Yeah, so they are. And one of the things that I failed to mention that I think that in the next year arising from that is that the U.S. doing the sanctions, I think many people think like, well, you can't really associate it with Russia or, whoever the individual is. But what we are seeing is already a shift to attacking countries that don't have sanctions because it's easier. So these threat actors are getting word back of like, I can't pay you because of sanctions. So now a lot of the the PAC, Asian PAC, they're starting to get hit more. So I think in 24 and 25, you're going to see that a lot more because of the sanctions.
Have you seen a difference between the different classes of MFA in terms of attacking like SMS versus like the Microsoft Authenticator versus like the active technical tokens like a YubiKey or a smart card?
So that's an excellent question. That goes back to being a target of choice. Once you're a target of choice, that's where that technical question becomes so important because of how they're navigating. But it's also a matter of, if you're a target of choice, again, DEF CON starts Friday. Those are all the hackers that are going to tell you, if we want in, we're getting in. It doesn't matter. But when I'm talking about MFA, because it's more of a drive-by situation, it's enough to stop them because, okay, you had MFA, ugh, bleh, I'm not going to waste my time because this company didn't have MFA and I'm in. So that's where it comes into play. It's just enough, just enough. Like think of them as I don't want to say the lazy hacker because then they're going to be like, oh, Catherine, how lazy am I? But that's what I mean. It's just enough.
One of your previous slides showed VPN, that vector, as a combination of either brute force or stolen credentials. Do you have that split or that percentage of which is more common? And is that ratio changing over the years?
Brute force is less common.
Okay.
It's, again, the easy path is always like, if you can hit the easy button every single time, that's what they're doing. But it's catching up because we have a lot of these exploits, all of those kind of things that are happening.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So most of these threat actors are operating overseas, and there are certain countries, right, that we attribute them towards. The question is around what differentiates extortion claim versus a war exclusion clause in policy, because most of the times the carriers are trying to put it in a war exclusion, or is that a false myth?
That's a myth. It's extortion and war, completely separate realms. But that's Bridget. Raise your hand. That's a good one for brokers too, but totally different.
Okay, but just to follow up on that, right? So, if the extortion limit doesn't cover the extortion payments, then knowing that if that threat actor, there's evidence originating from a country that attributes to that war exclusion, how does that work in terms of, could that be brought in or no, not at all?
No.
Okay, thanks.
On the topic of dependent system failure,
Yes.
are you aware of any efforts to proactively identify those, future linchpins so that we can try to apply what pressure we can to get them better so that they can better withstand those sorts of things so we don't have those outsized effects from one company getting attacked?
I would like to say that there's a cure. But if you look at the historical, just on Change, let's use Change Healthcare as an example, the DOJ actually warned the US government when they were going through the whole issue of if it's a monopoly and should they merge and blah, 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 blah. The DOJ was like, look, this is too much data in one place and it makes them a target of choice. Here we are. So the answer is no, and if you figure that out, please come work at Tokyo Marine.
Yeah, so question around, a lot of statistics you spoke about, especially around MFA.
Yeah.
Have you noticed specific industries that might be more laggard compared to others around when trying to push these controls, especially, for example, us having clients in specific industries? Do you see trends that you may not have disclosed?
Yeah, so obviously I would say healthcare is one of them. Think of the areas where airlines, another one of them, things where we have sadly, more antiquated technology, and then also nonprofits because it's expensive. I actually was speaking with someone at Google and I applauded them during our discussion because and the next week I was talking to someone at Microsoft and I told them, I was like, the problem with your product is twofold. One, Microsoft, you're charging for this, and two, you're not keeping it in the on position, you have it in the off position and people have to elect to turn it on. Google turns on first and you have to elect to turn it off. That means someone actually has to go in and be like, no thank you, I don't want a seatbelt. Great, well thank you so much and I hope to see you all next year.